Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Tracy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. So what are we getting into today, Tracy?
Well, today's story is one that inspired a women's movement and finally put laws in place to protect battered women in the late 1970s. This is the first story we've covered that discusses domestic abuse. As with many of the stories we've told in the past, this one can and will be triggering for many women. If listening is too difficult for you, please stop listening now. I completely understand. But, like I have said many times before, if we don't talk about the hardest of the hard topics, then how can we spread awareness? How can we speak the truth to help other women? If we stay quiet, then no one else will come forward. As women, we need to be able to recognize the signs of abuse when it starts. The signs are subtle in the beginning, and we don't even really recognize that it's happening. I mean, let's be honest, we recognize and feel the flags, but brush them away with whatever rationale we want to give them. So let's continue to stand together, support one another, love one another, and understand that we are not alone. Women are stronger together. So let's get into it. This is Season 3, Episode 7, Francine Hughes, The Burning Bed. Francine Moran Hughes was born on August 17th, 1947, in Stockbridge, Michigan. Her mother named her after a French musician. Francine grew up in a home where her father was an alcoholic and abusive to her mother. She was raised to be a good girl, to save herself or her husband, but at age 16, she put eyes on a man named James Mickey Hughes. Francine couldn't take her eyes off of him. She was immediately drawn to him like a moth to a flame. Mickey wanted her just as badly, so the two of them started dating pretty much from the moment they met. Francine was raised to save herself for her husband, and she had every intention of making that a reality. But with Mickey, there was no stopping. Mickey was love bombing her big time and sunk those hooks in deep. Since they had crossed the boundary and she gave herself to him, she made it clear that they should be married. And Mickey was all in. He wanted her to be his wife. She was his possession, his property. Francine and Mickey were married in 1964, and things started to change pretty quickly. In the movie The Burning Bed, which came out in 1984, Mickey and Francine lived with his parents after they were married. Francine had quit school and married Mickey when she was only 16 years old. And there were signs of what was to come. Francine was a beautiful young lady. She always had her hair done, makeup just right, a bright and bubbly personality, a beautiful figure, and she dressed well. One day, Francine was so excited she had bought a new outfit. I can just imagine what it looked like. A sleeveless top, frilly at the waist, cute high-waisted pedal pushers. Francine couldn't wait for Mickey to get home to see her. But when he walked through the door, it wasn't what she was expecting at all. Like, not at all. Mickey became enraged, told her to take those clothes off and get them off now. In an instant rage, Mickey lost it right there in front of his family. He lunged at her and literally started to rip her clothes off. Mickey's father and mother just sat there, minding their own business, as Francine ran to their bedroom and locked the door. Well, a locked door wouldn't be a barrier between a man and his wife. His property? He busted through the door as Francine cowered, crying. He immediately started apologizing. I can just hear it now, because it's what they say, right? I'm so sorry, baby. I love you so much. I just see you looking so beautiful. I don't want other men looking at you like that, thinking that way about you. I just get so jealous. I'm sorry. I love you. I love you. I love you. I'll never do it again, baby. I'm so sorry. You have to believe me. You mean everything to me. Yeah, blah, 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 dude. But she forgave him. Things will get better, right? She thinks, if I don't wear something like that again, then everything will be okay. Mickey will never do that again. But guess what? He will. Again and again and again and again and again. And that's exactly what he did. One day, Francine bought some nail polish. She was so excited about it. She painted her fingernails, and she couldn't wait for Mickey to come home so he could see her beautiful nails. But just like the outfit, Mickey blew up, and this time, kapow! After hitting her, he would apologize, drop the I love yous, the whole I'm sorry, the whole I'll never do it again, I love you so much bit. Do you see a pattern? Here's what's worse. After every physical abuse episode, Mickey would do the whole blah, blah bullshit, but now he's coming on to her, showing her how much he loves her, forcing himself on her, raping her after physically abusing her. And I'm calling it rape because that's exactly what it is. This was not consensual. She did it out of fear of what would happen if she refused him. As time went on, year after year, things just continued to escalate. One thing that happens with domestic abuse is that the degree of the abuse, the intensity of it, will always get worse each and every time. It always gets worse. I hope you hear me on this.
Can I just stop you for a minute and ask for you to reiterate? First of all, it's the 1970s, and they get married when she's 16. Is that what you said? She was 16 when they got married?
They got married in 1964, and yes, she was 16.
Okay. Can we just talk about the absurdity about how literally 50 years ago, women were still in the position of getting married off in puberty and then being property? Can we just talk about how that was merely 50 years ago? Can we just take a second and how crazy that is?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing because I'm sitting here like 16. I mean, do you even need permission at that point? Your parents have to sign something?
I don't even know, but I'm listening to you, and you're like, okay, so she's 16, she gets married off, and then in front of the family was the first kapow, was the first big blow-up, right in front of everyone else, and it was just acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
She ran into a back room, and they all minded their business.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
I just needed to just grapple with that for a minute.
Yep.
I'm grateful that this was partially what pushed over the women's movement, and shortly after, in 1976, women were allowed to have bank accounts on their own. So I'm glad that this was one of the things that pushed it over, and this was one of a million occurrences that happened simultaneously around that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Just needed a moment to grapple with that because that blows my mind. It makes me angry. Aside from the domestic abuse, and by the way, everybody's calling it DV now, right? Because we can't really say domestic abuse or domestic violence. We have to say DV. It was DV, which means domestic violence. That's a thing now. I've been hearing that like everywhere lately.
Well, that bothers me, and it also bothers me. The other thing I hear all the time is sexual assault versus rape. No, it's rape.
Yeah, and you have to say SA. You can't say sexual assault. You have to say SA.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Why?
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, you know what? Maybe that's one step in the right direction where it's not going to happen anymore. Now that we can't even say the words anymore and we have to initialize it, maybe eventually it'll just disappear. So that's one step in the right direction.
Wow, let's hope. Preparing for this, researching for this, reading this, writing this, I have just been really upset. It's just really gets down in the core and makes me extremely angry at what women had to go through. And there was nothing to protect them. Nothing and no one.
Well, they didn't even think it was protection. That's just how it was.
Yeah, there was nothing in place.
Yeah, nothing in place because there was no problem as far as they saw.
Not in a man's world, there's no problem.
Crazy. Okay,
Okay.
go on.
All right.
I don't know if I'm going to make it through this one.
I know. I'm telling you, it's a rageful story.
Go ahead.
Okay. So it wasn't long before Francine was pregnant with their first child, then their second, then the third, then the fourth. Mickey's drinking was out of control, and the beatings were on the regular. Each time the beatings were increasingly brutal. Mickey would hit her with his fist, throw her around while calling her a bitch, all right in front of their own kids. As soon as their father exploded, which he did often, the children would immediately scatter and they would hide as they listened to their father call Francine a bitch while punching her. Hearing the sound of their mother's cries hearing the fierceness of their father brutally abusing their mother. Because Mickey was spending all the money on alcohol, there was never enough money for food. In an interview, her son Jimmy recalled that his mother would pop popcorn and mix grape jelly into water for them to drink because they didn't have any food in the house. He said, quote, "She was scared a lot of my dad. I know that she lived in constant fear. Little things would set him off. She might say a word, and just the inflection of the way she said it may set him off. It would start making him mad. It was just across the face, or in the face with his fist. He had her in one of our living room chairs, had her pinned down in the chair, beating her. From the back view, which I was the only one that seen this, you could see his arm just swinging and just hear him hitting her." Francine would tell her kids to call the police, or she would call the police when the beating paused. They would come, but nothing was done. It was obvious when you looked at her face that she was beaten, but only a report would be written. There were no arrests. Never an arrest for battering his wife. There were multiple calls, multiple visits, multiple reports. Just rinse and repeat. There was no help for her at all. If the police didn't witness the beating, there was nothing they could do. There were no laws in place for misdemeanors regarding domestic abuse. On one occasion, when the police were called to the Hughes residence, they could see that Francine was horribly beaten. And right there in front of the police, Mickey said, quote, "I'm going to kill you when they leave." And what do you think the police did? Well, I'll tell you, nothing. Whether there were laws in place or not, do they not have a conscience? They knew he was beating his wife, not only on this visit, but on every visit they ever made. There was a time or two that Mickey did get arrested, however, but it wasn't for what he had done to Francine. Oh, no. It was because he was being belligerent to the officers. On those occasions that he did get arrested, her son Jimmy said, quote, "He would just come home even madder, and a lot of times my mom would get beat again." Their mother had tried to get away before, and he would always tell her, "There is nowhere you can go, bitch, that I won't find you." Most of the time, he treated her just as something that he owned. She was his possession, and he didn't even allow her a friend. In the movie The Burning Bed, they don't reveal that Mickey had affairs. However, in a newspaper clipping I found regarding her testimony during her murder trial, Mickey was absolutely having extramarital affairs. He not only had them, but he would also rub it in Francine's face. She would ask if he was fooling around, and he would come right out and tell her he was, and spared no details. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Mickey spent all the money they had on alcohol, and Francine was becoming increasingly desperate to feed her children. She, with her children, went to see a social worker to find out how to get food stamps. She was told that her husband would have to approve since they were married. Now, according to the movie, she was told that if she applies for separation, she could get the food stamps, but she didn't have any money to pay for the application fee. Feeling badly for Francine, as this person could see that she was an abused woman, as she was sitting there with multiple bruises, the social worker reached into his wallet and paid the $7 if she would file. And she went for it. Soon Francine left Mickey while he was at work. She took the kids and moved into a place of her own. Not long after she settled into her house, papers were filed for divorce. And soon the two were officially divorced. Francine was doing amazing. The children were living in a peaceful home. Their mother wasn't being beaten. But Mickey always had Francine in his crosshairs. He never stayed away for long. He kept showing up, telling her that, he was a changed man. Even his parents applied the pressure. Mickey's mother would say, "He's better now. He stopped drinking. He's a changed man. You need to give him another chance, Francine. He loves you. He needs his family. He needs his children, his wife. You need to do the right thing. Marriage is hard." Yeah, fuck you. That wasn't a marriage.
And here's the parents, goading her in. Literally, oh my God, I can't even take this story, Tracy. I can't even take this story. Here is this abuser's mother, another woman, telling this woman that she's a fool for not letting her son beat on her. Literally, that's what's happening. I know that's not exactly what's being said, but that's what's being said. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's okay.
I don't like people.
Yep. Well, Francine was holding on the best she could. She was setting boundaries, and I'm sure that felt powerful, but scary at the same time. According to the movie, one day Mickey showed up at Francine's place. He was trying all his usual tactics to win her heart over again, but she held firm, and that did not set well with him at all. He left, and I'm assuming he hit the bottle pretty hard and got into a very serious car accident. So serious that he was in intensive care for a time. Francine was notified about it and would spend many days and nights at his bedside. When he was finally discharged, Mickey was back at his parents' home. He would only allow Francine to care for him. No one else would do. It had to be her. Francine felt badly for Mickey for all that he was going through, and during this period, he was not abusive toward her. But once Mickey healed from his injuries, he showed up at Francine's doorstep and just never left. Mickey hadn't changed. The verbal abuse and the physical abuse picked right back up where it left off. So, divorced or not, there it was. Francine and the kids were right back in the hell where they were before.
This narcissistic ass, he just roped her back into his world of chaos.
Yeah.
I can't even take it.
I know, she got away in everything.
Because I know where this is going without even knowing where this is going.
Francine really wanted to go back to school and take some college courses. Now, I don't know how she talked him into it. Perhaps it helped that she had applied for grants to go to school, so it wouldn't cost him a single penny. As soon as he gave her permission, she promptly enrolled. Now, I have read that she was taking business classes in one article, and then I read that she was going to school to be a nurse in another one. So it's a little gray there. I'm not sure exactly initially when she went back to school what she went to school for. I can only imagine how amazing it felt to her to actually get out of the house and do something for her. She did everything she could do to please her husband while taking classes and spending time away from the family. She was doing what she could do to keep the peace. With time crunches related to school, Francine had bought some TV dinners to feed the kids for dinner. Mickey absolutely lost it when he saw what she pulled out of the grocery bags. First, let's be clear, he didn't want Francine out of the house. He didn't want her to better herself. He didn't want her to be out in the world. He didn't want her to have a life or any friends. And God forbid if she was ever to be happy. So tonight would be the night to teach her a lesson. Don't you dare make that for dinner, he told her. She continued because she had to feed her children. As her kids were sitting at the table eating, Mickey lost it. He swung and hit Francine in the face. The kids ran from the table like mice hiding. The TV dinners were thrown to the floor. Mickey was hitting, kicking, punching, and calling her names. He rubbed her face into the food and told her to clean it up with her hands, all the while rubbing food into her face and her hair. After she cleaned everything up and put it in the trash, Mickey dumped the trash out onto the kitchen floor and told her to clean it up again. Tonight's beating was extremely violent. No longer does Mickey love bomb her after he beats her. Now he just makes it very clear that sex will be happening. Mickey was extremely drunk this night, so sex lasted a very long time. And then finally, he passed out. Looking back on this night, her son Jimmy said, quote, "At times she did try to go to college and try to commute back and forth from there. He eventually got tired of that, made her burn her school books in the burning barrel in our yard. And then it escalated, and so he ended up getting up and abusing her. And that was quite a bad, severe case of abuse that night." Later in an interview after her murder trial, Francine said, quote,
"Smashing food in the kitchen, dumping out the garbage, rubbing it into my hair, hitting me. I remember how I felt sitting there. And it was just, I don't know if I can describe it to you, but it was the most alone feeling in the whole world. And I could hear the kids crying and hollering, "Mommy, are you all right?"
After last night's savage beating and rape, Mickey was passed out cold in their bed. But for Francine, it was just the beginning of what she would do next. She was aware of what she was doing. She knew it was wrong, but her psyche kept saying, "Do it, do it, do it." Do it. Francine put the kids into the car, then walked into the garage. She grabbed a container of gas, walked back into the house, and headed directly to the bedroom where Mickey was passed out drunk. She stood in her bedroom, looking down at Mickey in his drunken slumber without a care in the world. She started pouring gas under the bed and all over the room. She lit it on fire, walked out of the house as the bedroom was bursting into flames. She got into the car filled with crying children and drove straight to the police department and told them what she had done. She was immediately placed under arrest. Mickey did die that night, and the home was severely damaged from the fire. Later in an interview, her son Jimmy recalled what happened. Quote, "My dad was really punching her that night, really bloodied her up bad that night, and my mom decided she had enough. She put us kids in the car, went back in the house, came back out in a rush crying. All us kids were screaming. I remember looking back just like this as he looked over his shoulder and seeing flames through the trees. And that's how it began." In an interview on how a murder case brought domestic violence to light from the New Yorker, Mr. Arjun Gradanas, the attorney that represented Francine during her murder trial, said, quote, "Everything that had happened to her for years and years and years and years needs to be seen as an accumulation. And when you talk about a threat to a woman, it's that entire history that is the threat. To her, there really was no other way." Later in an interview, Francine said of the night she set fire to Mickey,
And I thought, I'm never coming back. Never. And then I thought, because there won't be anything to come back to, and that's when I decided I would burn everything because there wouldn't be anything to come back to.
when her attorney, Mr. Gradanas, met her in the Ingham County Jail, the moment he met her, he thought, quote, "Oh, this is a nice person." But Francine didn't want to stand up for herself. She didn't want to talk to her attorney. It was Mr. Gradanas that was getting frustrated because he wanted to help her. He finally told her what was happening out there. There was a huge movement happening since her arrest. The streets were full of battered women who have had enough. Francine had given them the power to come out of their homes, protesting for Francine's freedom and for their rights as battered women with no laws to protect them. All the big news stations were flocking to Michigan to report on the Francine Hughes story, and it was gaining national attention.
Yeah, that's a great thing that came of this. But the thing that burns my ass, this guy has been murdering her slowly all of these years since she's 16 years old, and he was only arrested when he would batter the police. Meanwhile, she tells the police what happened as she's bloodied and beaten, and they arrest her immediately and throw her away in jail.
Yeah.
Like, the irony of that blows my freaking mind.
Yeah, because there's a law about murder, but no laws about protecting women when they could physically see her.
The thing is when she went to the police station, it technically wasn't murder. It was technically, I started a fire and my ex-husband is laying in bed in the fire. It wasn't murder, technically.
It wasn't. That's
it was arson.
Yeah.
And she went directly to prison. It was arson, not really murder. I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of arguments there. We can call it a lot of things, but it wasn't technically murder when they locked her up immediately.
Yeah, they had to prove he was dead.
I mean, I know I'm being a little bit, splitting hairs about it to be a little bit funny because it's so infuriating.
Yeah.
It's so infuriating. I can't even get past it. But okay, go ahead. Tell me more details.
All right. So I found an article in the Lansing State Journal from November 1, 1977. Francine had taken the stand and tearfully told all the courtroom that she and Mickey were married in 1963. Within a year of the marriage is when the beatings began. She explained that he was, quote, insanely jealous. And she went on to say, quote, "The clothes I put on, he would tear them off. He didn't want me to wear my blouse tucked into my slacks." She also said that Mickey had ordered her to quit working at a restaurant in Jackson. Quote, "He made me quit because I bought a new brassiere that had stretch straps, and he didn't like it." At one point during her testimony, she was sobbing so hard that she said, quote, "I don't think I can do this." The judge excused the jury and spoke to her quietly, and soon she was able to carry on. Now, at the time of the trial, Francine was just 30 years old. Once the court session resumed, Francine told the jury that it was within the first year of marriage when Mickey started having affairs. And he never hid it from her either. Quote, after I would hear about it, he would tell me about it. When speaking on why she married Mickey, Francine said, quote, it used to be a girl was taught to save herself for somebody. We had intercourse before we were married. I felt like I should marry him because of that. He wanted to marry me so bad. I never felt I had anyone who loved me that much. I just want to throw something in here. Francine came from a home with an alcoholic father who abused her mother. I think that's important to mention.
Yeah, of course, because it's pattern. It's what she knew. It's how she thought love was given and received.
Yep.
So, unfortunately, it's what we've been teaching ourselves. Women, I mean, it's what we've been teaching by what we have been role modeling. So it's taken us this long. So our generation, for us, for our age group, to teach our children that this is unacceptable. 50 years later, after it's already been happening for 200 plus years, because I still can't figure it out where in history where the women were completely equal. You only hear about places like Atlantis and, the fantastical fantasy places where women were in power. But everywhere else, they were second-class citizens, or third, or fourth, or fifth, really. It takes a long time with generational curses to be broke, and Francine was at the cusp of that. So she didn't know any better. That's what she thought love was.
Yeah, exactly. And sadly, at this point in time, and I'm not diving into politics, but at this point in time, everything that women have worked so hard for, they're trying to strip away from us. During the trial, several neighbors would also testify. They confirmed some of the statements that Francine had made during her time on the witness stand. They told the courts that yes, she was beaten, and sometimes publicly, and that she was a prisoner of her ex-husband. There was one neighbor that testified Mickey, quote, would beat his ex-wife and then boast of it. I would ask him where she was, meaning Frances, and he would say, she's home, mending herself from the night before. The same woman had also gone to school with Francine before she quit school. She said, quote, Mickey forbade Francine from having people in their home. She wasn't allowed to have close friends. Her husband didn't allow her to have friends. And when Mr. Cardenas asked her if she knew why, she said, quote, he said she didn't need friends. There were a total of 4 women who testified at the trial, and all 4 said that Francine was a good mother and a good wife. One of them, who lived across the street from Francine, said, quote, she was a very quiet type of person. She was very clean and neat. I never heard her swear. But when it came to questions about Mickey, she said, quote, he drank a lot, and when he was drinking, he was very mean. Each one of these witnesses seen Mickey beat Francine. One of them said they saw Mickey beating Francine right out in plain sight in their front yard. I found another article in the State News from Wednesday, November 2nd, 1977, titled Hughes Testifies in Trial. Quote, Francine felt she was watching herself as she spread the gas while Mickey was sleeping. It was like an urgent voice that kept saying, do it, do it, do it. I kept pouring the gasoline all over the floor. I was just moving, just doing it. After she lit the fire, she thought, quote, oh my God, I can't do this. But then she felt the door closed. Probably from the explosion, she said. Dr. Arnold Berkman, who was an associate professor of psychology at MSU, told the court that Francine, quote, is a woman who suppressed anger emotions all of her life, and that her controls finally gave way. She was at the mercy of her impulses. It was as if something snapped. She had reached her breaking point. Berkman also said, quote, Mrs. Hughes is not a criminal. She is not a violent person. Francine's defense attorney, Cardenas, was going for the temporarily insane defense, and that she had acted in self-defense when she killed her ex-husband. Quote, she truly believed her ex-husband would someday kill her. During the trial, Francine told the court that Mickey never beat her before they were married, when she was just 16 years old. Quote, Francine also explained that the only reason she took care of him after his accident was because he looked pathetic, and because she felt some responsibility for his accident. Now, I imagine she said that because earlier in the show, remember I had mentioned that she had left him, they were divorced, she was living in her own place, and he was coming on to her to get back with him, and she stood her ground and said, nope, beat it. And that's when he got in the car accident. So that's why she's feeling in this sort of way. And I hate that she felt this way. Years of conditioning beatings, I guess, right?
Yeah. He had control over her for a long time. The whole voice in her head saying, do it, do it, do it. And that was her subconscious trying to take back control. Baby, I'm so sorry. I love you. I own you. I love you. And you're supposed to just take care of me. All of that psychobabble was running through her head constantly.
Yeah. She grew up that way. She's 16 years old. And she's married. She's so in love with this guy, her first love, her first everything. And then 13 years of this. It's just awful. When Mickey showed up at their place after she nursed him back to health, he just decided that he was going to stay, right? So Francine said she allowed it because she felt she would be taking everything away from him that he had. And that was herself and the children if she left him. But the beatings and possessiveness continued once he was back in the house. Quote, fear dominated my life every day. I never knew what to expect. I couldn't move without him saying it was all right. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. Francine also told the court that after being beaten by Mickey, she would run over to his parents' house because they lived basically right next door. But, quote, they told her that they didn't want to be bothered anymore. When she went to see the judge who granted her divorce for help, he wasn't available, but his secretary told her, quote, most women like you have to leave everything behind and go to other states. In fact, the night she set her husband on fire, that was her intention, to just leave again. Francine also told the court about the TV dinners and the beating that had happened on the night of the fire. She also mentioned that on the night Mickey said, quote, he was going to take a sledgehammer to my car, that he was going to do something to fix it so I couldn't drive or leave anymore. This is when he destroyed her textbooks and made her burn them. This all preceded the fire that night. After he had beat her a second time, quote, she was ordered to serve him dinner in bed. After he finished eating, he said, quote, how about a little? He wanted to have sex. This was Mickey's MO. Beat her up and then demand sex. Quote, if I refused, I knew it would just start again. I felt awful. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want him to touch me. I'm telling you right now, that just kills me.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's a very common thing of abusers is because they think that the sex will fix it. The sex will let them know that she still wants him, and the sex will let her know that he'll still want her like that, as if that's a powerful thing, and it's disgusting.
Just infuriates me. It makes me sick.
Yeah, it's a power thing.
Francine recalled that after Mickey passed out that she put the children in the car, grabbed the gas, as she thought about all the things Mickey had done to her over the years. Quote, I never thought of killing him. She just wanted to take her children and leave. But when she was getting the kids' coats and shoes on to leave, they said, quote, Mommy, let's not come back this time. She thought to herself, quote, there won't be anything to come back to. Francine's 7-year-old daughter had also testified. She said, quote, my mom had a really great sense of humor and could make anyone laugh in any time of distress. We were miserable in that house. It was an everyday thing with my dad, the beatings, the abuse. As a kid, you know something is wrong, but you're taught to run and hide. You just have to listen and cry. Mom was strong. We never went hungry or never went without anything we needed. I believe she did it all to save us kids and herself. He was definitely on a path to kill us, and that came from her 7-year-old daughter.
That's the thing that even adults, when they're dealing with childhood traumas, a lot of childhood traumas come from not their own abuse, but watching the abuse of their parents, their mother. It's abuse that they witness. It was still abuse nonetheless. Hoping to yourself, oh, my mom is strong. But there was always probably that fear that they wouldn't hear mom's cries anymore. That's horrific.
It's absolutely horrific because I've been around, other people, grown-ups having fights, and I don't like it. I don't like the sound of it. I don't like the intensity from it. And then to be stuck in a house as a little child, hearing your father just punching and kicking and calling her names and her crying, I can just hear it, feel it, and it just really hurts.
And then instantly infuriating for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Ugh.
It's now November 4th, 1977. 7 days after the trial had begun. The jury consisted of 10 women and 2 men. Francine was found not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. She walked out a free woman. It was after this trial that laws were put into place to protect battered women. We have a lot to be thankful for because of the tortured time Francine endured with her ex-husband, Mickey. It just breaks my heart and makes me extremely angry learning what he did to her. It also breaks my heart even more to know that she wasn't the only one going through this. The case of Francine Hughes sparked a movement against domestic violence. Her story inspired author Faith McNulty to write the book The Burning Bed, which was turned into a movie and released on October 8th, 1984, starring Farrah Fawcett, who played Francine, and Paul Lamette, who played James Mickey Hughes. When made into a television movie, more than 75 million viewers watched it. The Burning Bed Syndrome launched police departments across the country to put in place aggressive policies to protect spousal abuse. The number of shelters for battered women grew from a drop in the bucket in 1977 to almost 700 when the movie The Burning Bed was televised. How about that?
But also, when those domestic violence laws started coming into place, 90% of the time, they were never followed through because the women would have to agree to testify against the men in anything going further. In order for there to be any repercussions for the man, it was still a power struggle. And most of those women throughout the late 70s, 80s, and even 90s, and I'm sure into the 2000s, domestic violence was still something that wasn't prosecuted well because the women would have to follow through and they would lose gumption.
Yeah, they would, because unlike in Francine's case, these dickheads were still living, right? So the police will come, and this happens today. The police will come and the woman has to say, yes, I want him prosecuted. And what do? They say no because they're so afraid.
Right, exactly.
Makes me nuts.
We still have a ways to go because we still have, the laws have compiled. Now we have the whole stalking thing and the harassment, and then we have order of protections and how many feet and this and that, and it goes back and forth. So we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, and I think it's a bunch of horse shit that they have to ask the woman if she wants to prosecute. Nope, this is the law.
I think in some states, it might be a state thing, but whenever there's a domestic violence episode and cops are called to a domestic disturbance, someone gets arrested, someone gets taken, whether or not the woman or the man says that someone was at fault. I don't really know that law, but I do know that someone gets taken out now.
It might be something, this does sound very familiar to me, Christine. It might be like a cooling off period. Like one of them has to go. Well, it should always be the abuser. Haul his ass into jail and let him sit. Maybe it's 24 hours, 48 hours. But then the next step should be, all right, swoosh in caseworkers, get this woman out of the house or give her everything she needs so she can get away.
It is a reality that it's not always the man that's the abuser in domestic violence cases. So sometimes it is women nowadays. Domestic violence, no matter the gender, is wrong, especially, with same-sex marriages and relationships. It's not always a man versus a woman. It's an abuser versus the battered, and the battered should usually prevail.
Agreed. Country singer Martina McBride was so inspired by Francine's story that she wrote a song about her called Independence Day. I need to listen to that. Francine did go on to remarry a man by the name of Robert Wilson, and from what I can tell, she found her peace. She was finally raising her children in a peaceful, loving home. Molly Wilson, an adopted granddaughter, said, quote, "She had this upbeat demeanor and was just so caring and loving and happy. I lived with her my entire life and didn't find out about what had happened until I was 10 or 11 years old. She didn't feel like it was something to be proud of. She never felt justified. She never felt free. I think that's kind of why she kept it low key, because I think she was ashamed and haunted by it." Francine did go back to college and became a nurse just like she always wanted to. On March 22nd, 1980, Francine Moran Wilson died in Sheffield, Alabama at the age of 69 due to complications of pneumonia.
Good for her, and I'm glad that she, at least the last portion of her life, peacefully, I hope. Remorse and relief, I would imagine. She probably struggled with all the time. Because ultimately, she did murder him.
And that was the only way for her to escape. If I don't do something, we'll always end up back here. Now, I do have a public service announcement. If you are experiencing domestic violence, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. It's 1-800-799-7233. Or you can chat with someone at www.thehotline.org. Or you can text START to 88788 for help 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm going to repeat those numbers, so grab a pen. The National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 1-800-799-7233 or chat at www.thehotline.org or text START to 88788. Now, I did log onto the website for thehotline.org to check it out. Immediately, once the page opened, a security alert pops up, reminding that whoever's looking on the site to remember that internet usage can be monitored and it is impossible to erase completely. It says if you're concerned about internet usage being monitored, like someone coming behind you, seeing what your history is, they post their phone number to call, which I have just read. They remind the user to clear their browser after visiting the site. The pop-up also tells the user to click on the red X in the top right of the page, and that is a quick escape, or you can escape by hitting the escape button on your keyboard by hitting it twice. Now, the escape button is on the top left corner of your keyboard, and it's labeled ESC. On this site, there is a ton of information, such as safety plans, local resources, legal help, deaf services, Native American services, how to understand relationship abuse, warning signs of abuse, power and control, why people abuse, and so much more. I encourage all women, whether you are in an abusive relationship or not, please visit this site and read what's there. We all need to know what to look for. You just never know when this information could save your life or someone that you know. Advocates are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I have listed this website as the first link in my sources for the show. Rest in peace, Francine. So that's our show, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. It was a rough one. It was rough for me. So please, everybody, have a look. Protect yourselves, protect one another, love one another. And we will see you guys back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.